chicks huddled under her wings was a real change. It's kind of hard for us in this, culture that we live in today to grasp just what this book represented. And in many ways, I have yet to find anything that would suggest that this is not the first book by a heterosexual that depicts the lives of gay people with admiration and respect and really even love. It was a remarkable entry into the field of gay literature. In fact, the woman who reviewed Gay Bar for the Ladder, the lesbian organization publication, mentioned at the end of her review, for those of you who don't generally read the literature on this subject because of the negative tone of so much of it, I encourage you to read this book because it's very different, and not only that, it's written by it's written by someone who is supposedly normal. So it is objective rather than subjective. So I mean, this was a fascinating window into the mindset even of gay people in that time period. So I'm not going to take any time right now to read anything from the book because we've agreed on time limits so that Bronson has time to talk about his book. But during the question period, I'd be glad to answer any further questions you might have. Thank you.
All right. Wow. Thanks everyone for showing up. Thank you to the Quattro Foil Library, this great bookstore. Thank you to Will for reading with me. I'm going to dive right into my and read something from my book. My book is called The Last Deployment. Essentially, what you need to know: I served with the U.S. military. I was with the National Guard unit out of North Dakota, and I was a carpenter, a very bad carpenter. And so in 2003, I got the call that my unit was being deployed to Iraq, and so I went. Basically, was 15 months away from home. Spent a large part of the early deployment in Fort Carson, Colorado, and then they flew us to Iraq, and we spent a year in Iraq, in Baghdad in the summer, and then up in Balad, which is about 45 miles north of that. And so my experience basically in the book is that experience of being gay and serving under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy during a war. I mean, and during the beginning of a war. And so the one other thing you need to know is, before I kind of get into reading a little bit from it, is I wrote it in first person, sort of the perspective that you sort of felt like you were with the character. And so the ideas that I bring up were the feelings, what I was going through during the time, and I wanted the reader to kind of feel that, even though those are sort of different from me as a person now. So, but it should speak for itself. So I'm just going to read a small section from that here today. And so the section I'm going to read is before we actually get into Iraq. When the war begins on March 19th, I am alone, watching American Idol on a 3-inch television screen. It was the announcement from President Bush 2 days earlier that sent shivers through my body. Bush gave Saddam Hussein and his sons 48 hours to leave Iraq. Since then, I've been waiting to hear Bush announce that the U.S. military was launching missiles at key locations around Baghdad. They were the words I'd wanted to hear. Sitting in silence, watching the missiles light up the Baghdad sky, I realize that I am on deck, waiting for a war I never thought I'd be a part of. Somehow, after a month and a half at Fort Carson, after days of waiting and preparing, after speeches from Captain Rohr and other military officials about the importance of our upcoming mission, I had become fond of the idea of war. I started to believe that we could do some good in Iraq. We are needed in that country to run off their hypocritical leader and to restore peace and order to a country in conflict. We are going to give this country back to the people. All I can think about now is how I am standing in a carpeted room in Fort Carson, Colorado, doing nothing while a war is springing to life half a world away. I am missing it. I am missing my war. I start to pace my room and wonder where my roommates are. Earlier today, we'd suffered through a series of long classes on military procedures and equipment information. At the end of the day, the sergeants quizzed us on what we'd learned. The final question was, how many trucks are there on a military post, and what is inside them? The question refers to the use of masthead trucks at the top of flagpoles. If a military post is overrun, the legend goes, the commanding officer is supposed to climb to the top of the post's commander's flagpole and retrieve a singular masthead truck, which contains a match, a razor, and a bullet. The officer is supposed to use the razor to cut apart the flag, and the match to burn the flag. Finally, the officer must dig up a gun buried at the base of the flagpole, place the bullet inside the gun, and send that round through his brain and out the back of his skull. As I listened to one of the battalion sergeants explain the answer, all I could think about was 9/11, how terrorists had attacked our country. I knew better than to think we were headed to Iraq simply to give the Iraqi people a better life. I knew there was something else in our motives, something more private and justifiable. I'd heard early critics of the war on terror describe the United States as a bully, but I didn't see us as bullies. We were doing what had to be done. We had to regain what was taken from us on 9/11, our dignity. I lie down to sleep, but my mind is racing with images of the war. In my head, I listen to this scenario. I dream up this scenario of what I'll be doing this summer. This grand adventure on the Arabian desert. I imagine sand dunes and camels, turbines, machine guns, oil fires, and sun. Lots of hours under the hot, beating sun. I also start to imagine a future where I'll return to North Dakota, a worn war veteran, where I'll bump into old high school classmates who will ask me what I did over the summer. I'll look blankly at them and say, I rode a camel across an oil field in the Iraqi desert. What did you do? The men fell in love with the war every morning over breakfast. In between bites of scrambled eggs and sausage, they watch the news reports of the latest information on the war. They point at the screen when the missiles fall on Saddam's palaces. They stare at the screens filled with images from the shock and awe campaign, their mouths open and their eyes glazed over. They sit silently as smoke billows out of Baghdad and sigh loudly when 14 American casualties are announced. They boo and curse at the footage of anti-war protests in Chicago and Washington, D.C., and cheer at the children jumping on Dixie Chicks CDs. One morning, I watch from the second-story window of our barracks while a few members of my platoon conduct drills with their gas masks. They take turns timing each other, seeing how long it takes them to put on their masks, starting when the timer yells, gas, 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 and ending when the soldiers are pumping their arms in the air, signifying that they're done. They train us to don and seal our gas masks in 8 seconds. We used to do whole weekend drills on gas masks. We'd put them on and run around the building. We'd run laps, take our weapons apart, even put them on at night and walk around the training camp. Now I watch the soldiers dotting the grass below the windows, their gas masks strapped to the sides of their right thighs, their left arms twitching like gunslingers before a showdown. The timer yells, gas, 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 and the soldiers rip open their carriers and struggle to get the masks to their faces. They look like beekeepers once the masks are donned. A dozen zombie beekeepers wandering the barracks courtyard. The men's enthusiasm quickly reaches home. We take turns calling our friends and family back in North Dakota. When I call my mother to tell her that my battalion is leaving for Kuwait in a couple of weeks, she breaks down and starts bawling. Once she hears those words fall from my mouth, Mom, we're finally leaving the States. She lets loose. I stand in the hallway of our barracks, where 3 phones have been installed, and listen to her sob violently into the phone. Next to me, Viv, one of the new members of our platoon, is telling one of his buddies about being deployed. "Dude, can you believe it?" he says. "I'm going to war. Me. Of all of us, I'm the one going to Kuwait. How far out is that, man?" He spoke with the kind of enthusiasm most of the battalion felt for finally having a mission. Mostly, I share the men's desire to be part of the war. I gaze starry-eyed at the television as missiles are launched over Baghdad. I like the way red and green tracer rounds light up the night sky. When the battalion issues sand-colored camouflage boonie hats, I too place mine on my head and stand before a mirror, commenting on how renegade the cap looks. I imagine slapdash camouflage makeup across my face. I imagine a machete and my rifle. Jungle vines hanging from the trees. I am Rambo or Charles Bronson, ready and angry. But there is something holding me back from fully trusting these men, from entirely fitting in among them. It could be that while the men are falling for the war, I was also falling for the men. In uniform, all the men look the same. But outside that uniform, when they shed their camouflage skin and turned into civilians again, I fell for them, like I did the grad photographer during college, or the British men I met in London pubs. Particularly, I've fallen for Fredericks and his good old boy smile. After classes and training one day, we go down to the base bowling alley for bowling, pool, and beer. I'm not much of a bowler, and the pool tables are all occupied, so I belly up to the bar, order a beer, and sit down before a video game machine. Fredericks sits down next to me and smiles. "Not a bowler, huh?" he says, his aw shucks dimples catching the little light in the bar. "Nope," I say. The bar is dark and crowded. Across the chipped up tables near the back of the bar, the DJ is setting up karaoke machines. Fredericks and I talk about his girlfriend, his family, and his classes. He eventually taps the video machine in front of us and asks what I'd like to play. We settle for some matching game. And for a few minutes we sit in silence, drinking our beers and playing the game. I watch him smile every time he gets something wrong, or the way his eyebrows bunch up when he can't figure out the game. Behind us, a woman has stepped up to the karaoke microphone. She announces that the next song is for all the soldiers in the bar tonight. The bar erupts with people cheering. The song is "Love is a Battlefield," and the woman is perfectly in tune. As the liquor takes effect, I lower the wall I've managed to keep up during the deployment. Fredericks leans against the bar and watches the woman sing. I watch him. I feel entirely comfortable in his presence. I mouth the words to the song, "We Are Strong," looking between the woman who sings and Fredericks, as if I'm the translator passing the words from her to him. For a moment, I just want to blurt out everything. A week ago, Grayson nearly outed me in front of the entire platoon. We were packing our gear, and I was talking about my best friend. Grayson looked at me and said, "Oh, I always thought you were gay." I looked back at him and wondered what to do. If I told him I was gay, I would probably face the ridicule of the platoon for the entire deployment, and I just couldn't handle that. So I lied. I said, "No, I'm not gay. Why would you ever think that?" But now, watching Fredericks sing along to the song, I have this great desire to confide in him. I have nobody else to confide in, and it's killing me to keep so much bottled up. I want to show him the picture of our lives together, the one I've been forming in my mind. I see us sitting at the bar, as if it's a moment in a movie I'm watching in a theater. I see myself, visibly distraught and half drunk, spilling my entire story to Fredericks. I see Fredericks smile and nod his head as he listens to my story. I see myself explain the difficulty of not being myself